So last week, we continued our series on finding rest by talking about how we need the shift in thinking from thinking that we're too busy to rest to instead realizing that we're too busy not to rest. Last week, we talked about how that was important for our spiritual health, and it was for two reasons. They're kind of connected reasons, but two different reasons why it's important for us to rest for our spiritual health. First is that when we take this time to rest, and by rest we really mean taking time to be lost in wonder, taking time to be in awe, to take in what God has created, both the outdoors, the beauty of the outdoors, also all the people in this room who God has created, fearfully and wonderfully made. When we take that in, and when we take time to rest long enough, to pray long enough, to see where God is at work directly, and also where God is at work through other people, it helps put things in perspective. You know, we see that there's some work that God is doing directly. We see there's some work that other Christians are doing, and so we're inspired to start doing some certain things, or we see the hole that's left. You know, God's doing this, other Christians are doing this. Maybe God's calling me to do this part that's left. It helps us sort through all the busyness of life to find God's true business for us. Because we know there's so many things clamoring for our attention, so many different things trying to pull us this way and that way and that way. And somewhere in all of that mess, we have to find out what's the thing that God is calling me to do right now. And it helps us to see where God's already at work, where other Christians are already at work. It's important for our own health to be able to move from busyness to God's business. But it's also important for a second reason that's very similar to the first, because when we take that time, when we're intentional about taking time with God, taking time in prayer, taking time with other Christians, seeing what they're doing, all of those things, we're spending time with God. And when we spend time with God, we're changed. We become more loving. We have more joy. We have more peace. We have more hope. We have more faith because we spent time with God. And so that's why today this sermon is entitled Resting for a Change. And that's not resting for a change in the sense of, we never used to rest, and so it's a change now for us to rest. We mean resting for a change. We mean developing habits of rest so that other things in our life might change. Specifically today, we're talking about our relationships with our family and friends. And to get us thinking, I want to ask you this. You don't need to raise hands, but how many of you ever wish you had more time with your family and friends? Or how many of you don't need to raise hands on these, this is just for you to kind of think, but how many of you ever wish that your parents or your spouse or your kids or your friends had more time for you? As we've been talking about this series, sometimes we wish we had 8-day weeks made up of 25-hour days, but if we got them, we just fill them up the same way, and then we'd want 9 days and 26 hours and on and on and on. It's not about having more time. The series is about how do we use the time that we have? How do we make rest a priority? Because we know that with all of our busyness, all of the things clamoring for our attention, if we don't make rest a priority, we can spend our life chasing this busyness and look up one day and wonder, where did it all go? Where did the time go? Where did my family and friends, where did those relationships go? If you need a visual to help you see this, you're in luck, because there's an app for it. And it's called the Legacy Countdown app. You can just Google that and download it to your smartphone or your tablet or your computer. And it's an awesome app, not just because it's orange. I don't know if y'all can see that in the light, but the app is orange. Go Tigers. But it's an awesome app not just because it's orange. Right? It's an awesome app because it lets you put in the birthday of a child. And it will tell you how many weeks are left until that child turns 18. How many days, how many hours, how many minutes, even how many seconds. You can also have some fun and type in the birthday of someone who's over 18, and it'll give you a negative number for how many weeks it's been since they turned 18. And my number is 552. Or you can put in an event. Like I plugged my wedding date in here, and it tells me how many weeks, how many days, how many hours, how many minutes, actually how many seconds, and I can actually watch them tick by. And it's scary. When you think about how many plans are left, and then you look at this, how much planning we have left to do, and you look at it, and you watch the seconds tick by. Or you have your kid's birthday in there, and you watch the seconds tick by. It's an awesome app because when we see how much time we have left, when we can actually see it ticking away, it helps us to be more intentional about how we use the time that we do have. It helps us to be more intentional. Make sure we take time to rest with our family and friends, because rest isn't something we just do as individuals. It's something that we do together. And in fact, Jesus talks about that in this passage. We've been looking at it every week, but today I'm going to read it a little bit differently. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30. Now, some of you know that Jesus came from Nazareth, which was way up in the north of Israel. But today I want to read his words to us as if he were from down south. He said, "Come to me, all of y'all that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and y'all will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And I hope I didn't make any English teachers out there cringe by using y'all. But no, at least one of you told Barrett what I said last week about George Strait. Because he let me know that anything George Strait said was highly appropriate and should not be made fun of. And George says y'all, so it's okay for us to use y'all. But the reason I do it, the reason it's important for us to catch that difference, is because in these verses, when Jesus is talking about rest, every time we have the word you. In the Greek, it's a plural you. It's a y'all. Come to me, all of y'all. I will give y'all rest. He's talking to a community of people. And sure, we can rest as individuals, and it's important to rest as individuals. We all need our alone time sometime. But just like everything else we do in the church, we can do it by ourselves. We can pray by ourselves. We can praise God by ourselves. We can worship God by ourselves. We can rest by ourselves. We can do all these things by ourselves. But they're so much more powerful when we do them together. It's powerful when we take time to rest together, to take in the wonder of the world around us together. And my dad turned 65 yesterday. I went down to celebrate with him, and all week, as I was getting ready to go down there, I took some time to think back through what my favorite memories were growing up. And I realized that all of them were somehow connected with a sense of wonder. Like the first time we walked into a Major League Baseball stadium together, and just the eyes got that wide and just took it in. And I realized my dad was as excited to be there as I was, as we began to wonder out loud about what it would be like to play there. Or I remember the times going down to Edisto Island and standing on the beach and watching the dolphins just swim by as the sun set. And just taking in the wonder of the moment. Or I remember the silly stories Dad used to tell me in the nights when I couldn't fall asleep. He created this whole family of characters named after sandwiches. There was peanut butter sandwich and ham sandwich and peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And he created this whole world of adventures. And we got to get lost together in these made-up characters, in these made-up worlds, and explore them together. There was a sense of wonder. And the same was true of my mom as well. I have an older sister. So summers in my house became craft camp. And so I learned a lot of skills. There was a time when I knew how to knit and could have joined the Knitwits, but I've let that slide. But there was that sense of wonder that you could take this pile of what just seemed like odds and ends and somehow put them together and make something beautiful, make something useful, make something worth keeping. There was a sense of wonder. And whether, in whatever relationship we have, whether that's with parents, whether that's with grandparents, whether that's with other adults who are taking care of us, whether that's with our friends, there needs to be this sense of wonder where we rest in wonder together. Charles Wesley has a famous song. We don't sing it over here very often. We sing it more at the traditional campus, called "Love Divine, All Loves Excelling." And at the end of that hymn, he ends with these words. He's talking about what it will be like in that day when we're there before the throne of God. We're in heaven with God. And he says we will then be lost in wonder, love, and praise. But for me, being lost in wonder and love, it's not just about what it will be like someday when we're in heaven, but it's also a vision for how our relationships should be with each other here. Because our relationships, our community here should be for us a little taste of what the community of heaven should be. We should be lost in wonder, lost in praise. We should be fully present with each other. Lost in the moment, lost in the time that we're sharing. Again, it's something we learned from Jesus. If we'll go ahead and put those verses up, I think it's verse 30. Go ahead and put that one back up. Actually, let's try 29. There we go. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Last week we were talking about how we learn from Jesus. He says, learn from me because I'm gentle and humble. I know in our day and age, being humble isn't it's kind of misunderstood. We often think of a humble person as kind of a wimpy, self-deprecating, I'm not good at anything kind of person or mentality. But actually a humble person is a very self-assured person. It's someone who's very comfortable in their own skin. It's a person that C.S. Lewis described in his book Mere Christianity with these words. He said, do not imagine that if you meet a really humble person, he will be what most people call humble nowadays. He will not be a sort of greasy, schmarmy person who's always telling you that, of course, he is nobody. Probably all you ever think about him is that he seemed a cheerful, intelligent chap who took a real interest in what you said to him. If you do dislike him, it will be because you feel a little envious of anyone who seems to enjoy life so easily. He will not be thinking about humility. He will not be thinking about himself at all. Jesus says, learn from me, for I am humble. And I hope each of you has somebody truly humble in your life. Somebody that when you're around them, they're 100% present. They're 100% engaged. Because having humble people, being humble, it's so essential for lasting relationships. And of course, it has to be mutual. It has to be mutual. In the book of Ephesians, Paul has written this letter. It's to the church in Ephesus, but it's also to us today. Because it's a church in which Paul's talking about how do we make this new community, at that point, this new community called the church work. In the first chapter, he lays out this plan that God has to bring all things and all people together. And then he talks about those who were formerly called Jews and those who were formerly called Gentiles have now been brought together in this one body of the church. And then beginning in chapter 4, he starts to write out, how is this community going to work? How are our relationships going to work? In the church, in our families, all these different, any kind of relationship, he goes into them. And he starts here with these lines. I therefore beg you to live a life worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness. If we're going to make these communities work, if we're going to make our relationships work, we start the same place that Jesus does. That gentleness, with that humility, with being present. Being truly present. But it's getting a whole lot harder to do, isn't it? To be present with each other. You know, thinking through all the things that is going on. We're playing travel ball, and work makes us travel, and then work makes us stay home late, and we're involved in this club and has to be on this board, and then the church asks us to serve on a committee, and then we realize late at night that, oh no, this kid needed that shirt washed for tomorrow, and this one's having a class party, and we have to bake brownies, and then we realize that we still have to pay the bills yet, and we have to balance the checkbook, and the college football season has 12 games now instead of 11, and it just keeps going. And it's harder to be present. It's harder for our families to even do the simple things together like sharing a meal. And now there's this new phenomenon. Sometimes you see it when you're out eating. That when a family finally gets together, a family of 4 finally gets together and they sit down at a meal, and there are 4 iPhones, 3 iPads, 2 iPods, and a TV blaring in the background. Have y'all seen that? A family can be together, but not be together. Church, we're too busy for that. We have too much going on to not take advantage of the time that we have. Take a rest from the technology sometime. Take a Sabbath. Turn it off for a while. Or at least get around the same iPad so you can look at it together. Find ways to be present. Because that's the true gift. As I thought back over my dad's birthday, thinking back over all of our memories, not one of them had to do with something that he just bought for me. I remembered the hours on the baseball field. I remembered the hours of him helping me with my math homework. I remember the time spent in car rides. I remember conversations where he just invited me to go along to ride to the store. Not a one about something that he just bought for me. Oh wait, I take that back. There was one. That Christmas when he bought me the G.I. Joe Ford. But you know what? I remembered that because we stayed up all night putting it together and then playing with it. We're so busy. We have to take advantage of the time that we have. We have to be invested. We have to share the wonders of life together, whether that's the wonders we see in the world around us, whether that's just the wonder that we are each so uniquely made. Because the time it's still ticking away. And none of us have time for that.